What plans do you have for the future? If you were to sit down and write out or at least visualize where you want to be in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years, where would you be? What are your long-term goals? Do you know? Do you know what steps you have to take to get there? You might be feeling overwhelmed with how fast the world is changing. It's changing at a really rapid rate. And the fact is, technology is going to be replacing a lot of the jobs that we have in today's day and age. The question is, are we ready for the future? Are we effectively future ready? Where do we see ourselves in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years? I know my last job will probably not be there. Everything will more than likely be automated, and a lot of the administration roles will no longer be available. At the end of the day, what is our end game? What is our end goal? So I think a lot of the time people stress about the changes that are coming because they know that these changes are coming, but they're not really ready or willing to retool, to learn more, to change their lifestyle. If you consider what you can do every single day to upskill yourself, are you doing it? Because if you're not, you're more than likely going to end up stressed. Because one, you know you can be doing more. You know you should be doing more, and yet you're not doing more. It's like you know you should exercise. You know you can exercise because you've got the time to exercise, but you don't exercise. So your body will start deteriorating and your health will start declining. It's exactly the same with your mind. So if you look at your mind, or not literally, because that'd be pretty mad, but if you consider your mind the same way you would any other muscle, the same way you would any other thing that needs to be nurtured and nourished and strengthened, we've got to apply the same principles. Because at the end of the day, our mind is literally the most important thing we have alongside our body. Our mind and our spirits and our body are all interconnected. But the biggest problem that I see we're facing is we're not nurturing our body and mind. We're not nourishing our body and mind. We're not strengthening our body and mind. We're not challenging ourselves. We're not trying to upskill. We're not trying to level up. This idea that since this is the way we've always done things, so this is the way things will always be done, it's not relevant and it's not true. The world is changing faster than we realize. So what are you doing to nourish and nurture your mind? Then consider your spirit. What are you doing creatively to find joy and passion in your life? It doesn't have to be something that you're making money from, but how are you expressing yourself? How are you finding that joy and passion and fulfillment in life? So today I wanted to think about what are the foundations that you can start laying today in order to start setting yourself up for that positive future. So that you're not stressed, you're not overwhelmed, and you know that you're doing everything you possibly can to be in a good place in 1 year, in 5 years, in 10 years. So the first thing I think we need to address is personal development. Obviously, there are a lot of people out there that don't really think about personal development. They kind of see it as a con. They're like, oh, all of these people are making money off of trying to sell me courses. But the reality is, if you're going to learn something, even if it's just 1 or 2 things from someone else, and yes, there is a lot of free resources out there, and I'm all for finding free resources, but I'm also all for educating myself through the people that are where I want to be. So either in health, in fitness, in finance, these people have dedicated their lives to mastering their niche. So I don't mind paying to learn when I know it's coming from someone who, to me, is the best teacher. We all learn in different ways, and sometimes people can help you in a way that is simple and straightforward to you, while to others it wouldn't really click. But if you're looking at it as everything out there is a con, that everyone out is just out to make money, if you keep looking at personal development like that, you're never going to learn. You're never going to grow. You're not going to find those little nuggets of wisdom that could save you 6 months of making mistakes, or it could save you a year of making mistakes. If you had to stop and actually consider, in the long run, How much time could this possibly save me? Why won't you take it? Take the opportunity to learn. Take the opportunity to grow. Another thing I see people struggling with is they're unwilling to dedicate that time to learning and developing themselves. Because they kind of have this false belief that, well,
I might be near retirement. I might be changing jobs soon. I currently earn enough, so why worry about learning how to manage my money? They also don't have the time, they don't have the money, they don't have the resources, or they're really busy. It's not a priority at that time for them.
But my concern is that the landscape is changing. The world is changing, and there is never going to be a good time for you to make these changes. You're never going to have just 12 months to sit down and, dedicate all of that time to being a student. Because no one realistically can do that unless you're actually a student. So you need to make sure that you're prioritizing these small pockets of time that you can find in you every day. Even if it's just listening to something for 30 minutes on your work commute or reading 30 minutes before you go to bed. Because we all have 24 hours in a day. So you can't actually find more time. But it's how you manage your time for your self-development. Because if you're not pushing yourself, if you're not trying to get better and grow, then in a year's time, you'll be exactly the same as where you are now, except that potentially around you, the people around you have been growing and surpassing you. Because again, the world is moving forward and things are changing. And who's to say that in another 5 years, your job won't be replaceable and you never bother to upskill? I mean, that's really scary. It's the unknown. It's what everyone fears the most. And yet we all know it's coming. And a lot of people still won't acknowledge it. So my question is, can you find at least 5 to 10 minutes outside of obviously the 20 million other things that you have to do every day? Can you look at making personal development a priority for yourself? Because that will set you up in the long run to become more secure in the fact that you have a lot more skills to offer and you have a lot more confidence to sell your skills. And that will put you ahead of everyone else that has been complacent in their personal growth. I believe it's not a competition. I think everyone has something amazing to offer. But if you're not going to push yourself outside of your comfort zone, the world will surpass you. And everyone who is developing themselves will be getting ahead of you. So I think it's fair to say that we need to make sure that we're making personal development an absolute priority. So that is my number one tip for building your foundation. When the landscape changes, you have to change. Don't get so caught up in there's only one way to do things. 3 plus 6 equals 9, but so does 5 plus 4. Please don't get caught up in the comfort trap where you're unwilling to be adaptable or fluid. If you run a business, consider how can you constantly improve your product or service and become obsessed with serving your customers. If you're an employee, become obsessed with how can you be of value to the business. What skills can you bring that they require? But also, how can you better help them in serving their customers? Having customers or clients and looking after them is what keeps businesses in business and keeps staff employed. Think about how you can better manage your money. How can you pay off debt quicker? How can you invest? How can you save for emergencies? Think about how you can better consider your health. How can you nourish your cells? What can you do to feel more life and vitality? And start doing more of that. When you find something makes you feel amazing, don't stop doing it. How often will you be eating unhealthy food and feel rubbish and you start a diet and then you feel great and you're radiating and your body has so much energy, but then you slip back into the old patterns of eating and you start feeling lethargic and drained and unmotivated again? You can use this handy little marketing trick of using an away from and a towards motivator and focus on associating enough pain to eating unhealthy and enough pleasure to eating healthy to start making a mental shift. I'll link some resources down below that explain it a little bit more in depth. My number 3 foundational rule is simplify your life. When you have a full schedule all the time, when do you find the time to look after you? Keeping a simple schedule means you're far more adaptable to change, you have the ability to manage meetings and schedules better, and you don't feel overwhelmed, and you can spend more quality time doing that quality work. and you don't just feel like you're becoming a robot by having to be super productive. My number 4 foundational rule is goals. I did mention this in my previous video that I read a comment somewhere where someone said goals are stupid and basically outdated. But again, I just wanted to reiterate that goals are really vital to anyone achieving anything they want in life. So, what goals do you have? What health goals do you have? What spiritual goals do you have? What financial goals do you have? What career goals do you have? If you think of your life, you can think of it like a graph. You can identify these key areas in your life that you want to contribute to that will lead to you having a fulfilling and successful life. And you want to set a minimum standard against these areas in your life. Some basic examples are your physical and mental health, relationships, finance, spirituality, and career. But not everything in these buckets has to have the same level of commitment. So if you look at your health goals, you don't need to become an athlete, but you do want to look after your body and nourish it and exercise it and keep it strong and healthy so that you're showing up as the best self that you can. If you look at your finances, you don't have to have the goal of, okay, well, I need to become a billionaire, but you do need to have a goal of, maybe I want to be secure and I don't want to worry about, can I afford a coffee? Can I go out for dinner? You want to make sure you have a bare minimum standard against your goals, and remember, your goals and your standards will be very aligned, but you want to make sure you have a standard of what your bare minimum of what you will tolerate is, and every few months reevaluate your standards and increase them as you need to so that you can achieve the long-term goals you're trying to reach. So if you want to save money, let's say start with $5, then put as much as you can on any debt you have, because it's not the amount of money that you're saving that matters. It's the action and the habit that you're forming that matters. So if you want to eat healthy, start having just one healthy meal a day and be consistent until it becomes something that you don't even need to think about anymore because it's become a habit. You just want that healthy meal. Then you can increase it to 2 meals a day and so on. It's just creating that expectation of yourself and setting a new standard that will determine the long-term success of any goal you are trying to achieve. And that means also when you reflect on your progress, which I highly recommend you do, you can see where you started and you can see how much you've grown. So again, you don't have to have the same level of commitment because as life changes, your priorities and focus on these areas will naturally shift and change, and you need to allow for that. So you don't want to say, okay, I want to be at an athlete's level of fitness, I want to become a billionaire, and I want to have the most enriching, powerful relationships, and I'm going to be super spiritual, because you obviously can't. But what you can do is set that minimum standard and then say, this is going to be the minimum viable standard that I need to work on every single day in order to keep progressing and to keep moving my life forward. You can always add to it and say, you know, I want to make sure I'm contributing, because that also adds to such a fulfilling life. You just need to make sure that you've got your minimum standards set. So focus on your key areas that you've defined. Start educating yourself. And you've got that 1-year goal to say, I want to be able to do advanced yoga. I want to be able to make sure I'm meal prepping every Sunday, or I'm eating really balanced diets, or, you know, I'm financially set, or I've got some emergency funds saved. In your standard of living, in your foundation, you need to define what is my minimum viable standard for each key area. What is going to be my 1-year goal? And you can set fluid goals for 5 or 10 years, but remember, they're not set in stone. Life happens, and you want to be able to adapt and change as the situation changes around you. Because goals have to be fluid. They're not boom or bust. There is no such thing, because it's only in your mind that you're creating these limitations and the expectations, and that is the most dangerous thing that you can do. So what are your minimum viable standards for these key areas in your life? Let me know in the comments below, and also what key areas do you want to focus on? We've got to set these standards for ourselves and maintain that standard. And it's hard, it's so hard. But once you start setting these minimum standards, Just make tiny shifts that will basically start solidifying that foundation that you've already got, because at the end of the day, we already have a foundation that we're working on, but you just start making tiny shifts and building upon it. So make sure you never breach your minimum standards, and then over time recalibrate as you need to until you start finding that life is getting a bit easier. And as you recalibrate and as you build on your foundation, you keep strengthening new neural pathways that you're creating. As you start doing that, what will happen is naturally over time, that new minimum standard will become your habit. And habits are literally just your brain's way of making your life more efficient. So the more you do something, the more ingrained it becomes, and the more of a habit it becomes, then you can build on that. But until you clearly define your minimum foundation for setting your minimum standards, you won't be getting any different results from what you've already been getting. How can you expect to know where you're going if you don't even know where you're starting from? And what needs to be improved upon? So I've got a Defining Your Standards worksheet available for download below, and it focuses on core areas. So for me, I focus on health, spiritual, finance, growth, contributing, relationships, and career. But at the end of the day, obviously you can add on or you can take away what's not relevant. But these for me are my bare minimum standards that I focus on every day. Like I say, you can add on or subtract, and that's fine because we're all different. We all have different aspirations. And again, you know, your health might be in optimal shape, but you want to improve your career. So on the worksheet, it will have the areas where you can write down what you want to focus on, what your minimum viable standard is. And you can also clearly identify where you're starting from. Then after you've defined your minimum viable standard and where you are now, you can then start writing what your vision for the next 12 months, 5 years and 10 years is. What is your long game? And remember that this isn't set in stone. You can change it and adapt it as needed. You might achieve your 5-year goal in, say, 12 months because you didn't realize it was so achievable. But what it'll do is it will clearly show your goals, and it walks you through how you can break them down into bite-sized pieces and start making them daily habits. So once you've got all that information down, that is your foundation. And that's what you need to start implementing in your life every day, just so that you can start seeing some improvements and moving in the direction of your dreams and goals. So let me know in the comments below which part you're really excited about, and let's start taking your dream life and making it your reality. If you think this video worksheet can help family and friends, please be sure to share, and I'll see you in the next video. Is what keeps businesses in business and keeps staff employed. You have the ability to My number 3 foundational rule is simplify your life. When you have a full schedule all the time, because if you're not exercising your body, it's exactly the same with your mind. Ugh.